Monday episode of the Dog Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips. I hope you had a great Halloween and a great weekend. And we're going to start you off with something really, really cool, an exclusive of sorts. A couple weeks ago, New York Comic Con announced that the Atlas comic line is going to team up with Mego for a new line of figures. There's a lot of excitement about that. People are trying to get their hands on them. I think they're Walmart exclusives right now. And since then, people have been talking about, well, is Atlas coming back? What else can Atlas do? Because, it didn't have a long shelf life, the books, but they had a long fan base. So what do we call? We call our friend Jeff Rovin. Why? Because Jeff is the man behind Atlas Comics. He was the putting all the books together at the time. He was instrumental on getting this deal with Meagle done. There's a lot more coming, folks. Like I said, this is an exclusive with Jeff. He's going to reveal some really cool things about what's going on with the Atlas line, its future. And, it sounds really, really, really interesting and exciting. So, enough of me, Jeff Rovin. We have a guest returning. It is Mr. Jeff Rovin. Sir, how are you?
I'm good. How many people return to Dollar Bin?
We have a good return rate.
Okay.
We're happy about that. Folks
All
seem to
right.
like us.
Good. Good.
Now, there was a little bit of news coming out before New York Comic Con and then at New York Comic Con regarding Atlas, your child, uh, figures coming out from Mego. Congratulations. How did this all sort of come together? Nice.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I don't know if you got to see them, but it was, Stephen Paul, the producer who had done Ghost Rider, the first and second Marvel movies, became aware of Atlas probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and persuaded Jason Goodman, who held the copyright,
Mhm.
to allow him to purchase them. And so that deal was struck, and then it took a while for things to really get moving. A combination of COVID and a couple of strikes in Hollywood.
Mhm.
And I first met with Steven 2.5 years ago. It was March of 2022, and I remember, I told him, this actually is worth a lot more than you're going to end up paying for it, because you don't realize what I did at the beginning, in terms of integrating all of the characters. And I took out this original chart that I had. We may have talked about that last
Yes.
time. Showed him how everything was interconnected. And he said, "Holy mackerel, what we can do with that! So we can have a TV show and a movie and a podcast drama, and they could all be tied together with a video game and even comics." Yeah. Anyways, he was very excited about that. But as I said, then we got derailed by the strikes. So now there is a Devilina script in the works, and other one, two, three other Atlas characters. This is exclusive to you now. Will be appearing in the film,
Mhm.
and it really. I won't tell you what they are, but I will tell you this: when I first conceived of the characters,
Mhm.
Devilina was the nexus of everything that I envisioned, because only a 22-year-old could be arrogant enough to think, hey, John Milton left something out of Paradise Lost. And that was, what if Satan had a sister? So from that grew Grim Ghost and Phoenix,
Mhm.
because Phoenix was going to be the being of light, the counterpoint.
Mhm.
And I even had him meet the devil in the third issue of Phoenix. And Grim Ghost, of course, worked for Devilina's brother, although none of them knew of this connection at the time.
Mhm.
So it was going to be a kind of exciting thing to develop. But from that, everything else emerged in the Atlas universe. And so I'm very excited that we're actually starting at the beginning, where it was all conceived.
Yeah, I often think about the conversation we had where you talked about that chart because I think it's just so ingenious how you took the time. Because I mean, you have war books out there, you have Western books out there, and you were able to take everything and strings together into one point. And I think that just it's absolutely fabulous.
You know what? It was and I don't know if we talked about this, but it really came from Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Mhm.
You know, he had integrated Tarzan and John Carter and Pellucidar and Carson of Venus, and I remember reading those as a kid and thinking, "Wow, that is so cool! I never saw that coming." Um, but yeah, so the important thing is, for example, in Sergeant Stryker, we had Scorpion crashing in 1943 in his airplane, so he could disappear and emerge as someone else because he's immortal.
Right.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun and probably a lot of OCD tied into that. And then Rick came along and Rick Myers and fleshed out, he basically created Target and Hands of the Dragon and those characters. So we had a good time at New York Comic Con.
So did Mego approach you, or did you approach them about putting out some figures?
It was actually door number three.
Yeah.
Stephen Paul, the producer, knew knows the higher ups at Walmart, and Walmart was kind of frustrated that they'd missed out on exclusives with Marvel back in the day, so they said we're not going to miss out this time. So they came up with this proposal to do the initial four figures with Mego, and I was super excited about that because when I first started at Warren Publishing Company in '73, I was running Captain Company, the mail order division, and one of the first things that I implored Jim Warren to carry were the Mego figures. And the superheroes said, "Oh, we're not superheroes. We're monsters." And you see the title of the magazine is Famous Monsters of Film, and it's creepy. It doesn't say Mr. Mitch's Pitlick. But nonetheless, we put a full page of figures in, and they sold like crazy.
Mhm.
And I got to meet at that time Marty Abrams, who is still running Mego
Mhm.
to this day. So he was at the convention, and I was able to actually give him, which I still had, the original negatives that Mego had given us of the action figures. So those are now in the Mego Museum, and the universe works in that synchronic way, and that was a good thing. So Marty was there, and John Voight was there because he's also a friend of the producer.
Mhm.
And I won't say that I want him to be at least the voice of the villain, but I do.
Mhm.
And so he had a great time. I mean, he was just blown away by this whole concept. He called me before the convention and said, you know, I'm looking at these comics and I'm just, amazed at the imagination. I said, well, that's not unique to me. We're all of us nerds at these visions. I just lucked into the position to do
Mhm.
it. And so we talked about it. And as soon as I mentioned that Phoenix was a faith-based character, he lit up. I mean, because he is so huge into that.
Mhm.
And so he was very enthusiastic to promote this stuff. And stupidly, I didn't have my camera running when he came out, but uh, there was a huge crowd of people, of course, for him, and a few for the rest of us. But Larry Hama was there too, and I said to because we had been talking about Shakespeare, I said, "John, do the St. Crispin's Day speech," and from Henry V. And he rolls back his sleeve and he starts doing the speech. It was great. Um, and Larry was terrific. We did a streaming video which is on Walmart.com somewhere,
Mhm.
and so Larry and me and Marty Abrams and Stephen Paul and then John came on and he was talking about how exciting it is to be involved in this, and it is. But that's where we are. You're up to date.
So how did you decide on which four to do first?
That was not up to me.
Okay.
That was something that based on, and how can I phrase this artfully without that Stephen Paul had a particular interest in. They decided those would be the first four figures, and I completely concurred. And what I really enjoyed was having people come up and say, what should be the next group of characters? Tiger Man and Tarantula.
Mhm.
Then there were the outliers like Bog Beast and Morlock, but it's always fun to hear that. And people were just so um, I don't know. They were just so happy to be reunited with Atlas. I guess a lot of people said, "Oh, I had the original run," and or conversely, I never heard of them, and I can't wait because there's a comic book, there's
Right.
a reprint inside each figure, inside the box anyway.
Mhm.
Um, and they were all enthusiastic, But then again, I'm not a convention goer. They may get enthusiastic about fill in the blank. So I was happy to see Ultraman. You know,
Well, as soon as the news hit and people started getting the figures, I mean, all over Facebook, that's all people were talking about. People were posting pictures of them with the figures. Like they couldn't believe this was happening. I mean, it
oh really?
was,
Oh well.
I was so happily surprised that folks remembered and folks were excited to get these. And this, it's not just folks, older comic readers, but younger people too were excited to see these. And were you nervous at all that people might not remember and this might fall flat?
No, I fully expected them to not remember. It's been 50 years. Um, that said, the fact that we were part of a very large and formidable Walmart
Mhm.
booth sort of guaranteed foot traffic.
Right,
And then John Voight guaranteed some more foot traffic.
right.
And then there was a press release that pointed out that, I was the author of the Tom Clancy Op Center novels.
Mhm.
So there were people who came for that. There were people who remembered the Nintendo books I did in the 80s wearing video game show. I mean, that just blew me away. I think all of us, maybe you don't feel this way when you put the podcast out, but I never imagine that people are actually reading this stuff. I'm just sitting here in my office with my new Grim Ghost figure, and it just doesn't occur to me because you don't get mail anymore like you used to,
Right.
and I don't read stuff on social media anyway. So you're kind of in a vacuum, and it was gratifying. Plus, boy, it was a great Bandai Godzilla booth. That was the highlight for me. Being able to get some primo Godzillas.
I say, did you pick up stuff for yourself at New York Comic Con?
Just you know what, it was just this guy. I mean, 54 Godzilla.
Yeah.
I was just so happy to see those. But you've probably been to many many conventions, and you just get overwhelmed and intimidated, and just going to the bathroom there for God's sake. And um, so I just kind of stuck around the booth. Um, yeah.
20 years ago, did you ever think this could happen? Okay.
No, no, simply no. And I I don't know where it's going. I don't know. Nobody obviously knows. And we do have an arrangement with Paramount, and I'm uh, attached as a consultant to all of this stuff. And it's it's gratifying.
Mhm.
It's also frustrating when people assume that the Marvel Atlas of the 50s and Atlas of the 70s are just continuity, and I've had to explain that.
Mhm.
And what's really gratifying is to be able to have a, a platform not just to talk about Edgar Rice Burroughs, uh, but also there's been a lot of backlash against Stan Lee over the last few years, and I knew Stan, and we were in touch during the Atlas years as well, Atlas year and a half as well, and he was really supportive. And you know, you get to know somebody and their fingerprints, and when you read the comics, you see their personality, you see what they put in. Yes, Jack Kirby. Yes, Steve Ditko. All of this. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but I also worked with Steve Ditko, so
Mhm.
I know what that was like.
Mhm.
And I knew Jack Kirby from DC, so I knew what that was like.
Mhm.
And I know that Stan, and I dealt with Martin Goodman, so I knew what that was like. The fact that Stan managed to hold all of this together and still generate this amount of material and make it culturally relevant
Mhm.
and remembered and beloved, that's a lot on him. And so I was happy to be able to talk to people about that. Journalists from all over the world were there and asking questions, and not a lot of us are still around who were there at the
Right.
time. And it was good to see. I've seen Larry and Kama a couple of times over the years. It's good to get his perspective on record
Mhm.
for what happened back then. So yeah, it was. No, I never expected a long-winded answer to it. I never expected this to happen at all.
Well,
Did you? Did you? I mean,
no,
really?
I mean,
Right.
I'm surprised that nobody ever, because all these, books are out there. Did anyone ever approach you in the past to try to do something with these books to try to revive them? Or was it just sort of, they were just in a corner somewhere?
Well, Jason Goodman, Martin's
Mhm.
grandson, tried in 2010, 2011, and I thought those were not well conceived in terms of what Atlas had been. It was their own version of it, but it lasted even less long than the original.
Right.
And the interesting thing about Stephen Paul and his people is they are focusing on the first one or two issues that Rick and I did most of. And the reason for that is to them that has the pure Atlas zeitgeist,
Okay.
which was, you know, a whiff of the Silver Age, coupled with the mess that New York City was in the '70s. So it was that kind of very strange personality, which is why we had so much horror and characters that ate people. And it was just, yeah, they're doing it for a good reason, but boy, New York is really what a wonderful hellhole it was at the time. And so that infused the first and second issues of most of Atlas.
I say, look at Target. I mean, he was dealing with, I mean, nightmare after nightmare on the street, and the guy didn't lose his cool. And
No,
oh
no,
my
no.
God.
Target was. I actually have still some of Rick Myers's thumbnails from because he was a good artist, and so he would lay everything out, and I had some of them on display. We had a little museum section at the booth, which had Alex Toth's designs for Scorpion and my chart of the Atlas universe that I wrote out for Chip Goodman and Rick's thumbnails. Somebody who was looking at it, I was listening, said, "Wow, that's like John Wick." And I said, "Wow, that's going to warm Rick's heart when I tell him." So, yeah.
Well, the other thing that really amazes me is you're a very young man when you were doing this, and you were doing a whole lot of heavy lifting at that company to keep things going, to keep the books going, working with the talent, making sure that it's best quality books coming out. I mean, do you look back and say, I was really doing a yeoman's job there trying to keep this thing afloat?
I hadn't realized at the time that it was an impossible task, and I should have realized it because Bill Dubay had the same challenge at Warren,
Right.
Jim Shooter at Marvel. A lot of the editors, like Julie Schwartz and Joe Kubert at DC, whom I worked with, because there were a lot of the so-called self-described young Turks coming in at the time,
Right.
and they had their ideas. And Joe Kubert, in particular, wanted to respect that. But I remember he had quite a interesting letter exchange with Rich Corbin,
Okay.
and it was Joe finally decided. I think he just wanted to be able to tell the big boys, I don't want to work for you.
Right.
And I said, well, Joe, I was 20 at the time. I said, Joe, I don't think it was quite that direct, that simple, but it was an impossible task, and I screwed it up in a lot of ways. I will, there's no denying that. But you've got Martin Goodman, who is, the crusty old school publisher, who doesn't want to have to listen to anything artists have to say. You just do what he says, and that's that. Stan was an incredible. He was the cartilage between the scraping vertebrae. I mean, he just took all of that and it compressed him. And I could say, no wonder he eventually wanted to move on, and hence Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway and all those guys. You cannot win. You're always going to let someone down, and when really special the first comics because they were pretty much pure. It was such a rush to get things out that Martin and Chip were not heavily involved in them. And so things like the first Wolf and Iron Jordan, certainly Tiger Man and Phoenix and Grim Ghost just came through exactly like we wanted them to. Mm-hmm. And the art director at the time, Steve Mitchell, of course, was a he had worked at DC, was an artist himself. And so he knew exactly what we had to do. And we even produced artwork for Gothic Romances, which was their prose title. We got Russ Heath and Chaikin and Ernie and Neil Adams to draw interior art. I mean, come on, while we were doing the comics.
Right.
And those are great illustrations. Neil didn't finish his. It was still part pencil, part ink. And he said, well, no, I meant it that way. But that was okay. But yeah, if you look at the cover of Thrilling Adventure Stories #2, there's a wolf coming at Cro-Mag, the caveman. And originally the wolf's muzzle, I thought, was lost in the rock that Cro-Mag was standing next to. And Neil said, well, don't you think that's my artistic decision? I said, no, because we're not going to see the wolf's muzzle at all. So he just whited out the rock and made this kind of bizarre shape out of it. But you really, I learned you really have to pick your battles, and that probably wasn't one that I should have picked. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and then you've got deadlines, and then you've got the Comics Code. God, they just wanted to crucify what we were doing. Iron Jaw, we had so many fights just over the first issue of Iron Jaw.
Wow.
Because somebody was naked from the small of the back up, a woman. Yeah. And you can't do that. You can't do that. But it's her back.
Right.
I will call Martin and have you fired. All right. Put her in a loincloth.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because how did that all work with the Comics Code? Did you have, on the phone correspondence with them, like face-to-face meetings, or they just came back with a bunch of notes saying, no, 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 no?
We would send over the finished art, right, literally before it was to go to press, thinking everything would be okay.
Yep.
It never was. It never was. And I think I may mention this. Mike Sikowski got so frustrated at one point that in the Brute, he had the airplane wing, which he wrote 5H17, which when it reduced down said shit, and it got through. So little tricks that I had not yet learned. But yeah, so then Len Darvin, the head of the Comics Code, would call and really just chew me the hell out. And, and then you'd have Martin saying, this cover's not exciting. Wolf #2, for example, or Brute #2. We need stuff in the foreground. We need word balloons. And so Larry or Larry Lieber or one of his Marvel associates would draw something that did not look anything like what Dick Giordano or Larry Hama had beautifully rendered.
Yeah.
And with dialogue that was just, they cut a hole in the wall of the wall of the well to stick a demon's face in there. It just had nothing to do with it. It was just ruined it. But again, it was either that or give up. And ultimately, I just gave up. It was not possible to function there. So,
I would say when you look at the people that were working on the book with all those different personalities, it had to be a tap dance routine every day for you. Okay, how am I going to handle this person? Then I got to change my tone and handle this person. Then I have to be a little softer with this person. It must have just been a little overwhelming at times.
yeah, it was, particularly when some of them, one of the artists got violent with Rick. And we remembered the event differently. I thought he threw Rick against the wall,
Mhm.
but Rick remembered him taking out a knife and stabbing him in the foot. And I'm not, maybe that's what it felt like, or maybe it happened that way. It was so chaotic, but yeah, it was bad. And then Martin wouldn't like some of the artwork, hence the artists, and you'd have to make changes.
Mhm.
And you would make a change because it protected some of the other artists. Like he really liked Pablo Marcos, so at least we had that to fall back on because Pablo was a sweetheart. And we wanted to bring him to the convention, but it just got too expensive. And I wanted to bring Pat Broderick up too, another good guy. But the booth was really really expensive, and we were shouldering part of that expense. So anyway,
I, from our last conversation, I know you're somebody who likes to make sure folks get the credit they deserve. A lot of the people who worked on Atlas aren't here anymore. Do you think this new wave of Atlas is going to put those names back into people's minds again?
oh yeah, I mean particularly Ernie. Ernie was such an enormous talent.
Mm.
And I know when we were planning the Grim Ghost, for example, and he was really in sync with me. So when we were planning the Grim Ghost, he said, what do you want to do with this guy? I said, okay, I'm going to send you some pictures of Marlon Brando from Fletcher Christian from Mutiny on the Bounty. I said, I want that effete kind of foppish look. And so I sent him a couple of pictures, and he said, "Yeah, that perfect. I have it now." And everything he did, he replicated that. And with Tiger Man, I had given him some pictures of Steve Reeves from Goliath and the Barbarian, where he's wearing this lion face with claws and all of that. And I said, and I gave him, I said, put that face on Burt Lancaster's trapeze artist outfit from Trapeze. And I sent this picture of him, with his arms. I said, but just make it tiger motif. I got it. It's great. It's like John Cleese in that Scott of the Antarctic skit. It's great. Yeah, it's great. Ernie was just such a cheerleader. He loved it. He loved having the opportunity to do action.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, Ernie, Pablo, I think was quite a talent, still is quite a talent, and I'd love to see more attention given to him. And Pat Boyette was a sweetheart and a talent.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really want these people to get credit for what they brought to it.
Is the hope also that with this news, with these figures, people start looking back at the old comics as well as people start looking for them, reading them, and with the possibility of reprinting them, maybe in collected formats?
Yes, there is a good possibility of that. It is devoutly to be wished, and I believe that will happen.
That's awesome. Now, for you, what are your next steps in all this?
Well, if theoretically conjecturally we were to do omnibus editions or anthologies, I've got a lot of the original notes and ideas that would go into that to kind of chart the history of it and you call attention to these extraordinary people. Yeah, another one, Rick Estrada, who did the art on Devilina and nominally the script because I pretty much laid it out in its entirety. But as soon as I told him that we wanted to do Paradise Lost, he understood it. He really was into that. We may have talked about Sal Amendola on Phoenix too. I was looking for him. I really wanted him to be there. As soon as I said, what would really excite you to draw for us? And he said, well, is there anything with kind of iconography? I said, funny you should mention that. Phoenix. I want as many iconic kind of religious poses, traditional Renaissance painting poses as you can put in.
Right.
That's what he did. That's what he did.
So
Again, you can only be that arrogant. Well, you can be arrogant anytime, but at 22, it has a unique odor to it, right? It's sort of like actors who do Shakespeare. If they're doing it at Northwestern and they're doing Macbeth, oh, this is easy. I understand this. Then you're 50 and revisit and say, "Holy shit,
I was
this
going
is a killer."
to say, you're 22 years old and you're telling some of the hot new talent at the time, along with a number of legends, this is what I want, da 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 da. And oh my God, like you
Yeah,
said, you had to have,
legends.
confidence.
And there were legends that I couldn't. I really wanted Kurt Swan to work with us, and I years later I got him to draw a book that I did, and that was a treat. But again, the guys I remember from DC,
Mhm.
um, I really wanted to bring a lot of them in there, but contractually, Carmine, who was the publisher, Carmine Infantino at the time, he stomped on that idea immediately and issued a memorandum that said, we're going to increase your rates and give you royalties and all of that stuff, but only if you work exclusively for us. And that quickly became a problem.
Right.
The Marvel putting people under contract and DC doing the same. So yeah, there were forces beyond just getting the magazines done.
Right.
It was the whole industry was seemed like it was against us. But
Was there ever one talent that came on board that you said, okay, this is a game changer? This is going to maybe turn the trajectory a little bit?
for us or for them,
Well, for you.
Rick. Rick showed me some art that came in over the transom, as they say, and it was Marshall Rogers. And so we gave him a small illustration for the Movie Monsters magazine, and liked it a lot. And so Rick started working with him on Hands of the Dragon, and somebody actually came up with something that he bought at the Rogers estate from the estate of all the character sketches of Hands of the Dragon, and he showed it to Rick, and Rick practically he didn't practically he flipped out. He said, "I haven't seen that for 50 years. Where did you get this?" It was so exciting to see that. At the time, we really were striving for something else, for something authentic, and it went in a different direction ultimately. But that was good. Walt Simonson. I mean,
Right.
he was terrific. The stuff he did for us, Temple of the Spider, and some of the Movie Monsters illustrations, just great. He did I think I told you about this, the Giant Monster series that we never got to publish, and I hope we do get to now.
Right.
But, I'm probably forgetting a whole bunch of people, but and the black and whites had a lot of the Selecciones Ilustradas, the Spanish artists, and so anyway, yeah.
But you see, the thing is, I'm like, I see how happy you are thinking back, and so it's all these wonderful things, and now here we are. They're coming to fruition. Like they're getting the spotlight rightfully put back on them. So for you, you must be just absolutely so proud of all the work that has gone into this.
Well, again, I was standing on the shoulders of giants. It's to have known Bob Kane at DC, to have worked with Joe Kubert,
Mhm.
to have talked to Jerry Siegel, all of these things, you just don't want to screw up.
Right.
And the thing is I also Jim Warren was also really pissed when I left and went over and to start black and whites as well as color magazines. And I understand that now. I didn't understand it then. I mean, I did, but I figured there's room for all of us. And it's not like we were going to dethrone him or anything. Um, it's, but it was such a blow when it all caved in that I figured, it's cursed. I never want to see it again. I never want to hear about it again. But again, I didn't understand even more of the forces, like Martin and Chip and their relationship. Chip being Martin's son, and that had to be tough, or how he got fired by Marvel. And I really didn't think about any of that stuff. I was just a fanboy who wanted to do good, funny books. And you either adapt or die. You know? So is it gratifying? Sure, because I felt they had merit at the time. But you know what? We all felt that what we were doing in that ghetto of comic books had merit, and nobody believed it. Stan was the first one to shout it from the rooftops, really, and to break out. And so he paved the way for this. Um, but again, there were too many tidal forces against it. And so, yeah, it's gratifying, but, I still want to see where it goes and what happens and what does it mean in this multimedia streaming theatrical, non-appointment TV, podcast, video game, etc. world that we're now moving in. What does the collector's market look like to Walmart? This is where they're making. This is a hill on which they're making a stand now. Very expensive stand, and not just with us, but with a lot of. I was surprised at the things that I saw in their booth. For collectors. So it's exciting, but I don't think any of us knows where it's really going. I mean, other than the immediate next steps. It's a different world out there. So,
is there a chance now, hypothetically speaking, if these omnibuses come out, that your chart could be something added into it so folks getting into it can see how all this is working? Because I would think that would be almost like a keystone at this point right now for as this thing grows. Okay, who are these people and how are they linked together?
Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to do with that chart was I wanted everything to be linear. In other words, you're starting with Cro-Mag and the fall from grace of Satan, and you're going all the way through the westerns, the war, the 30s in New York, the modern day, the future with Morlock, Planet of Vampires, and Ironjaw, which are all connected. And then the Wolf, the Planet of Wolf the Barbarian, which figures into all of that in a surprising, a Paradise Lost kind of way. So I think it is probably a good idea to spell all that out a little bit, but I don't want people to become intimidated the way. And it's one of the reasons that Deadpool and Wolverine was so great was they poked holes in that whole multiverse thing. I don't want multiverses, and I don't want fractured timelines and multiple, Tigermans or whatever. Not to knock that. It worked for them at Marvel and DC, and then it stopped working for them at Marvel and DC. I don't want quantum entanglements. I don't want any of that stuff. I think that has been heard by all the powers that be at the studio and in Stephen Paul's office. I've said it often enough, and I think they see the fall off at both Marvel and DC with Flash and Ant-Man and how complicated all of that became. Like you have to do homework. The risk of putting the chart out there is people will start thinking, oh, I've got to know all this. And they don't, because if Bog Beast is in the background of, Tarantula, you may not even call attention to it. It may just be a reference, and people can start putting it together themselves. We know where it's going. And I started to do that a little bit in the prose novellas that we did in 2020. And the reason that Jason and I put those out was I wanted to see how it would work if Devilina suddenly showed up in Target,
Mhm,
or we introduced a character that we never got to do, Dr. Klutz,
mhm.
back in the day, and his relationship with Vicky and Tarantula. What is Vicky's relationship to Tarantula? It was all thought out, believe it or not.
Mhm.
So that's going to be fun for me to work on.
Mhm.
Is the kind of keeper of the timeline, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh,
It sounds like the future is very bright right now, and like I said, on social media for the comic fans and stuff like that. I saw 13th Dimension put out an article saying, "Is it time for Atlas Comics to come back?" So there's a lot of buzz right now, and a lot of people are very excited about all this happening, as we speak.
but you know as well as I do that if you don't replenish that, refresh it,
Mhm.
you forget about it pretty quickly. I was surprised looking at the Atlas Facebook page. There was a hot topic for a day,
Right.
and then it was not only buried and forgotten, but increasingly buried and forgotten. And nobody goes back and looks at those. Really, it seems.
Right.
Um, so I still don't know how they. I mean, they got a really good PR firm to keep this going on that front and in the mainstream press as well. Um, but I I don't know. I am much more interested in, as you say, calling attention to all of the insanely great people who not only worked with us but built the sandbox. I mean, it's so important. Frank Thorne. There's another one. Frank, when he was working at DC, he was a little bit self-conscious, but his style was a lot like Kubert, and so Joe would do the roughest pencils, and Frank would then do the finishes and all of that. And he said, I really want to just kind of do my own thing. So we were able to let him do that
Right.
at Atlas, and so yeah, maybe we lost 4 out of 6 battles, but the two that we won, like seeing Frank Thorne bring in his Lawrence of Arabia job, which I had given him a free hand to draw based on more on history than a lot of the film was.
Mhm.
Um, that was really gratifying, and for Pat Boyette to be doing. He did a story called Carrion of the Gods. And I said, yeah, now look, you got to put these things in the background because they relate to Phoenix. So he says, oh, man, that's really exciting. So this is going to be in this comic, but that's going to be, oh, that's great. So all of these guys were really psyched. When it crashed, they were, everybody was disappointed.
Right.
So to be able to shine a spotlight on what they did do and how enthusiastic they were, that's going to be great. Jeff Jones was enthusiastic because I was letting him do just Jeff as macabre as you want to get. Just
Right.
go for it. You want a skeleton crawling out of the mire, go for it. The third cover of Macabre, which we had at the booth,
Mhm.
was a skull against a wall that had been shot full of holes and just old blood crusted on it and flesh. Great. That's just what we wanted to do. So we you know there have been justified complaints, but the people who were happy made me happy. That was great. Howard Nostrand, who had been Neil Adams' mentor, to
Mhm.
have him drawing Target, he had a blast on that. Literally a blast. I mean, he was shooting people's heads off.
I was gonna say
Uh,
it's
so
Rambo to shame a little bit sometimes with
it
the.
really did. There was a 2 panel sequence where he had the gun up against somebody's nose, and
Yep.
then the next panel was just a cloud of smoke and a blam, and Target was still in the same pose. Comics Code gave me crap about that, and I said, "No, look, there is no brain matter. There's no skull matter. There's nothing graphic." And I sent it to the printer. I sent it to World Color Press. I said, "We're not changing this," and we still got the seal of approval. Um, but like I said, pick your battles.
Well, I'm so happy, and I know the hard work that you put into it, 50 years ago has, led to where we are today. So congratulations to you. And I know
Yeah.
us fans we can't wait to see what's going to happen next.
Okay, and I will tell you, and then we'll figure.
And we are back. Yeah. So you have a possibility of movies, omnibuses, TV shows. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This is an untapped resource of comic material. And I think Jeff made a really good point, guys, which is when he said, he didn't want to complicate the stories. He did that whole chart of how all these books are connected, but he didn't want something to come up that folks really have to read all the books in order to understand what's going on. There could be, Easter eggs here and there that fans will be like, oh, yeah, da, 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 but they don't feel like, oh, if I don't, know what's going on in Ironjaw, I can never watch the show. So I thought that was a really good point on his part. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully, there's more news to come, and Jeff will let us know. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're Atlas fans, let us know what's your favorite Atlas book. And if you have the Migos, show us pictures. Are they cool? The reprint comic in the back. We'd love to see that. So more shows coming up this week. It's I think it's a mainly Mike week besides me, so I think you'll have a blast with that. And we will see you soon. Bye.